there, everyone. It's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a very special Christmas project to share with you, featuring 3 different tag ideas using Tim Holtz's new Christmas die release. So I'm going to be using a bunch of different dies from Tim Holtz's latest Christmas die collection with Sizzix, and I'm going to show you how I made 3 very large, giant tags that are perfect for adding to your gifts this holiday season. So hopefully this will spark some ideas for you. The first one I made was with the Retro Santa die. Now this guy is so cool. He's super jolly, and I ended up pairing one of the new bold text Christmas Thinlits dies with this set so that way I could really tie along that holly jolly theme. I've die cut the pieces needed for building this Santa, and if you look on the back of the dies when you go to create with these sets, they do mark the recommended colors that you should die cut from. Now you of course can change the colors, you don't have to use exactly what is recommended, but it's a good guide, especially if you've never built these before. So I'm going to build the Santa, and for all of these pieces I used some cardstock from Memory Box and some Simon Says Stamp craft glue stick to piece all this together. So the paper was from Memory Box, and the adhesive for this is a Simon Says Stamp glue stick, and it was just quick and easy. And of course, because it's a little bit of a liquid glue, it gives me time to fiddle and shift things around, so that's really helpful. When I was building this, I wanted to be able to kind of shimmy stuff. I loved all the colors for this, especially that gold buckle, which is a die cut from Simon's matte gold cardstock. So I have a tag here. This is a Dina Wakley tag, a number 8, that I covered with some Tim Holtz paper from the Idea-ology Christmas collection. To embellish our Santa, I brought in some glossy accents, and I'm covering his gloves with the adhesive so that way I can sprinkle some clear rock candy distress glitter on top. This is going to give a really nice sparkle to this Santa, and I really liked that little touch. There are these really great tag dies in the Tim Holtz Christmas die release. I'm going to be using the topper for now, but that largest die that's in the set I'm also going to use to create the other tags that I'll end up showing later on in this video. So the tag topper I die cut from some brown cardstock, and then I'm picking out one of the bold text words that I want to use for my tag. Ultimately, I went with Holly Jolly. I thought it paired up with the Santa so well. I die cut it from some green cardstock from Simon, and I'm going to save those letters. I'm not using them for the project, but those letters will be perfect for another piece, so I'll set those aside in my scrap bowl. For that bold text, I do want to trim it down so it's a little bit smaller than what I die cut it from, so I'm just going to use a Tim Holtz trimmer to help me get it to the size that I want, basically leaving a small border around the edges of the words. This is going to get popped up on top of my tag. I used Simon Says Stamp thin 3D foam squares to adhere it. This is going to look really cool on this Idea-ology backdrops. That's what I used for the paper on this tag. I love how Santa pairs up with that holly jolly greeting. It makes everything so cohesive. So in the Twig and Stump collection of dies, which, by the way, that set is so adorable. I didn't get to use it for the tags yet, but I totally am dying to use that die set. Well, in that set are these really good snowflakes, which I die cut from some glitter cardstock and then just glued around the Santa. I wanted that snowy feel. And then to really accent things, I brought in some pine tree garland from Tim Holtz's Idea-ology release and added that along the bottom as a nice trim piece. To make it very festive, I pulled out some of these droplets and used the half red pearls to add little berries basically in between the garland. That adds a nice pop of color down there. It really finishes things off, and I love it. I wrapped up my tag by adding some Tim Holtz velvet trim and some twine along the top. That's going to finish off this tag. Festive and so fun with that retro Santa, and I love the bold text greeting to pair with it. All right, let's keep moving because we got a lot more tags to make. I'm going to go ahead and take the frame tags Thinlit dies. Now what's really cool about these dies is that they not only die cut your tag, but they can also letterpress a frame. And I'll show you how to do that. First, I'm die cutting the tag straight up from some Woodgrain cardstock. This is new from the Tim Holtz Distress collection. So I didn't do any inking to the die yet. This is just a straight up cut tag. Before I go any further though, I do want to emboss this with the Pine Branches 3D texture fades. This embossing folder makes such a cool dimensional texture, and I love how this paired up with the wood grain. It's a little tough to see, but it's so pretty. With the new Tim Holtz Distress Christmas Mica stains, I'm going to spritz this tag really well with these colors. So I picked out, I don't know, I think like 3 or 4. I sprayed with a little bit of water too to help get things moving. You can see those pine needles starting to show through. But with these Distress Mica stains, I'm creating this really cool background that all these colors are going to blend together and really give me a dreamy color combination. It may look a little muddy at first, but trust me, this is going to turn out really cool. So we got some red, some green, some blue. You'll notice I'm letting things kind of drip and melt together. I did bring in a baby wipe and dab up some of the stuff that was a little bit more heavier. And in some cases, like along the top, I didn't want as intense of that color. So I played around with it and got the look I was going for. Now that has to set aside and dry. So now let's work on the flowers that are going to go on this particular tag. This is the Holiday Brushstroke 3 die set. Oh my gosh, these poinsettias are just so beautiful. I die cut them again from some memory box cardstock, and I'm just going to go ahead and layer these pieces up. Again, always make sure to read the back of these Colorize dies because Tim marks them with the recommended colors that you can use to create these pieces. So it makes it really simple. So I just like to lay them all out and then work through and figure out which ones need to be cut from red, which ones need to be cut from green, etc. So I love making these because they make such a cool dimensional die cut and it really comes together fast, especially if you use the reverse. So you can see I have 2 different types of flowers. It uses the exact same 2 shades of cardstock. It's just the reverse. I use the light areas on one and then those light areas that were the leftover pieces got used on the dark layer. So it makes a really nice flower. I added a little bit ink blending around the edges, and then I also brought in some of that Distress Mica stain, and I'm going to spritz that onto portions of the red flowers. Now, at first, I had used just some standard yellow cardstock for the center of the poinsettias, but then when I did the mica spray, a little bit of it got on the yellow area, which necessarily wasn't bad, but then I decided I wanted some gold. So I just decided to switch gears and glue some gold centers onto those poinsettias. So you'll see that later. I die cut some of those leaves, and then again, like I said, when you have to die cut from 2 different colors of cardstock, utilize all those pieces. And see here, I can now make double of each set of leaves because I'm using the reverse of the pieces that have to go on top versus under the bottom. So both of these leaves are the reverse of each other, but they create such a great contrast for each other, and they look good in the project. So double the leaves means I get twice the pieces with the same amount of work. So here we go. We're kind of creating a nice assortment. I used a few of the simple dies that are in that set too. They just cut straight up one single layer. And you'll see I cut those from brown and some teal just to add some interesting color here. This is where I'm starting to glue everything together. For the poinsettias, I used some foam squares, but then for just these smaller pieces that are going tucked in the background, I just used a bit of liquid glue. I used Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue. So that was really simple to just tuck those underneath the flowers and create the nice arrangement that I'm going for here. After I added the flowers, I brought in this Flurries stencil from Tim Holtz and some of the new Snowfall grit paste, and I applied that through the stencil. Now the cool thing about this grit paste is that it dries translucent and it picks up the colors underneath, so you can't really see a ton of it once it dries, but it gives such a beautiful texture to this card. It's very frosty. There are some ephemera pieces that I pulled out from Tim's new Idea-ology collection. These numbers are so cool. All I did was put some foundry wax on top of them and set it. And I have these super cool numbers that almost have like a patina effect. Very, very neat. And they add such a nice bold statement on this tag. We needed that nice dark heavy color to really provide a little bit of punch between all these flowers and textures we've got going on here. So we're making progress. This tag is looking really cool, but of course I wanted to embellish it further. There are these adorable snowflake seals in the new Idea-ology collection from Tim Holtz. And so I just put some silver foundry wax on here very messily so it looks aged. And I'm just going to glue that right along the bottom of the tag with some hot glue. That looks super, super cool. The fun thing about tags is because they're going on a gift, you can make these as bulky and dimensional as you want. You don't have to worry about putting this into an envelope. All right, and if any of you know me and Christmas, I love mica flakes. So throughout the rest of these 2 tags, I loaded them with mica flakes because you can't have frosty Christmas projects without them. So I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle those mica flakes onto different areas where I added some glossy accents. And then once that dried, I went ahead and tucked a little bit of twine around the top of the tag. Super simple, really cool. And the back side of this tag, because this is a wood grain textured cardstock, I actually stuck a die cut on the back so that way it has a nice place for somebody to write and you're not trying to write on that textured wood grain. So definitely a trick to keep in mind. Now, speaking of those frame tags, remember I said I wanted to show you how to ink these up because it looks so cool? Well, I have some Distress Oxide ink, and I really like Oxide ink for this because it's a little thicker and it sits on top of the die really well. Regular Distress ink has a tendency to kind of bead up, so I really like the look of the Oxide ink. I'm taking a brayer from Tim Holtz and just dipping that in the ink and rubbing it across the tag. There is a really nice etch layer that allows you to basically press that ink into your tag. So once I flip this over, you'll see. And I did it very messily. I wanted it to look distressed, so I didn't want the lines to be absolutely perfect. So you'll notice once I take the stencil off that the lines are not perfect. And I love that look. Now this stencil, by the way, is so pretty. It's perfect background for creating a really nice wrapping paper, which is what I'm going for here. I'm going to color this with different colors of Distress inks. All the colors that I'm using are listed below in the video description, as well as all the products that I'm using today, including the new Tim Holtz dyes, the Idea-ology release, everything. So go check out the links if you're interested in any of the products that I'm using. I also use Simon Detail blending brushes to add all that ink in those different areas. Once I had all the ink covering this stencil, I went through with some Snowfall grit paste and I smeared it right over top of all that ink. I know this is going to smear the ink that's sitting on top of the stencil, but that's what I wanted to create. I wanted the look of almost like a watercolor effect. So once this paste dries, which of course it'll be clear and textured, these are going to look so neat. We're going to have some of the colors blending into other colors, and I love that effect. And there you can also see the imperfect lines of our inking that we did when we die cut this tag. I think that adds to the effect so well. So while that's drying, I'm going to work on the bow, the giant bow that is going to go on top of this tag because I'm trying to make a tag that looks like a present. This die is the BOWTIED Colorize die, and I love it. It is such a cool die. I cut it from that same memory box cardstock that I keep mentioning that I used. Again, that is also linked in the video description below if you're looking for it or over on the blog, so don't worry, I have it there for you to find. I'm just going to go ahead and die cut all these pieces, stack them all up, and again, always make sure to read the back side of those dies to be able to know what colors to die cut each piece from. Makes it super simple. I'm going to go ahead and start adhering these pieces onto my now dried tag, which looks absolutely fantastic. For these pieces that are the bow that wraps around the present, I'm going to just cut off any pieces that are hanging off, but the bow ends and the bow itself, I'm going to let kind of overlap and overhang on the tag anywhere it needs to because I love that effect. I used some foam tape to attach the ends of the ribbons down because I wanted them to have a little bit of lift. That dimension is really important. It adds to that lifelike appearance, so that was definitely a great addition to this tag. Speaking of additions, I had to put some tinsel as the little hanger for the tag. I also pulled out those super realistic candy cane confections, put one of those in the center of the bow, and then added a few of these really pretty mirrored stars around that bow for a little bit of sparkle. I like that effect. Now, speaking of sparkle, I needed to add a sentiment, but I wanted some really pretty metallic shine to match up with that tinsel. So I pulled in some foundry wax in silver and I just put that on top of one of these Christmas baseboards. Once I set that, that provided a really nice silver gilding to the edges and I just love how that looks. I just used some hot glue to attach that down along the bottom of the tag. And then finally, the last little touch, I know, I keep going, but the last little touch was to add some mica flakes. So I first started by putting mica flakes around the candy cane, but then I was like, oh, I need more. So I sprinkled more of that glossy accents here and there around the bow, and then that allowed me to dump quite a bit more mica flakes across this tag, which was the perfect amount of frostiness to finish things up. How pretty is that? So there you have it, 3 different tags that I made with the new Tim Holtz and Sizzix Christmas die release, along with other products from Idea-ology and the Distress collections from Tim Holtz. All the new Christmas products I use throughout these projects, which is really fun. So if you're inspired by these projects, I hope you'll check out the links below in the video description as well as on the blog so that you can find all these pieces and make projects inspired by the ideas that I've shared. Thanks so much for watching. I can't wait to come back and share more with you. But until then, I hope you have a fabulous day.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.